Now, our next speaker could engage us with information, with a perspective, with history, on a long multiplicity of subjects. He is a very humble fellow, but he is unquestionably, along with his lifelong friend and business partner, Casey Kasem, an architect of American music culture. His knowledge of what happened, his contribution to it is significant, to put it very mildly. However, in addition to that, he has a perspective that is under-publicized. He is an Arab American. I'm a Mutt American. I mean, I probably should rip my own face apart given my ethnic heritage, but Mr. Bustany is a, quote, Arab American. And one of the things that he can speak about with considerable authority and experience is, what is it like to be an Arab American in the United States post the September 11th, 2001 catastrophe? He has joined us this evening to talk about possibly his contributions to American music, but perhaps more tellingly, his observations as an Arab American. And however, I had a brief oversight. I'd like to acknowledge the presence here of my friend and colleague in Democratic Party affairs in the Santa Cruz Valley, Mr. Mike Kolka, who's the president of the Democratic Alliance for Action. Mike, good to see you again this evening. Thanks for being here. Mr. Bustany has every bit as much of a credential as his well-known partner, Casey Kasem, on these affairs. He is the host of a radio program that has a perspective about what it's like to be an Arab American. I have a personal observation, maybe you can share, Mr. Bustany, whether you think it's accurate, that I think that maybe being an Arab American in 2011 has some similarities to be a Japanese American in 1942. I'm not sure if that's accurate. Maybe you can work that into your presentation. But Mr. Bustany is not a Santa Cruz Valley resident, but we're honored that he would come to share the incredible information that he has. And with that, I would like everyone to give a very warm welcome to Mr. Don Bustany, who will give us so much this evening that we really will find valuable. Mr. Bustany, please come to the podium. And please take about, say 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions, which I think will probably be profound, actually. And again, Mr. Bustany, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, and I'll tell you, if I had Alan Cameron's pipes, his vocal cords, I'd have ruled the world long ago. You notice that it's not a small thing, if you're so inclined. The power in political circles go to the people with the vocal cords that vibrate slowly and toss out the low registers. I have a chicken voice, and so I have to work close to the microphone. And that's okay as long as the microphone's nearby. I don't just stop at random and pick somebody to kiss on the way up. That's my stepdaughter, Kristen. The expectation I had from Minerva's invitation many weeks ago was that you wanted to hear about what it's like to be an Arab American, not an Arab in America, but an American of Arab descent after 9/11. Well, immediately I'll tell you what it was like 1 week after 9/11. I was invited by Bill Maher to be on his ABC show called Politically Incorrect, 1 week after the Twin Towers went down. The other guests were that marvelous actress Alfre Woodard and the far-left liberal turned far-right conservative David Horowitz. There were only 3 of us that night. And it was interesting during our discussion for me to find out how little Dave Horowitz, who is Jewish, and Bill Maher, who is half Jewish, how little they knew about the history of Israel. And I'll come back to that because that's the thing that interests me most, the Arab-Israeli relationship, the Israel-Palestine issue. That's what I want to talk about with you in the main. But first, let me give you a quick sketch of what it's like to be an Arab American after 9/11. It was just as bad before 9/11. The general public attitude and what it's been fed by our media and by institutions and individuals who have an interest in what's going on at the east end of the Mediterranean, it has a tilt. Some of you may be aware of that, and some of you may not be. Is there a sense of a bias in our media that comes to your attention? You see a finger or a hand? Okay. I brought you an example of the very frequent such biases that appear. In this morning's LA Times, on page 8.3, is an article on the aftermath of the flotilla stoppage. You know what? I'm going to try. Can you hear me okay in back? No, okay, I'm not going to try. I don't have the pipes. An article on the aftermath of the stopping of the flotilla from various ports in the Mediterranean to sail to Gaza. And it's written by Edwin Sanders, a very good writer, who's posted in the Middle East. And, oh boy, this is going to be tricky. Excuse my angle. In the 6th paragraph, it starts, activists on one of the flotilla boats attacked Israeli soldiers with knives and pipes. Now that's a picture, isn't it? The Turks on the Mavi Marmara attacked Israeli soldiers with knives and pipes. And the sentence continues with, as the Israeli troops tried to seize their craft in international waters. You can't convince me that that was an innocent reversal of elements. Any casual reader not well versed in what has been going on over there is going to be struck by that first half of the sentence. They attacked the Israeli soldiers with knives and pipes. And then the real essence of what went on finishes the sentence. It should have started with Israeli Navy and commandos boarded in international waters, boarded the ship, and were met by resistance with the people aboard. That's spin.
That's piracy.
Piracy. Well, yeah. But that happens often. I call the LA Times about once a week to talk to the foreign desk. They know my voice by now and tend to instantly switch me to the reader's representative. And I'm saying, no, don't. And they click, they're gone. So what it's like to be an Arab American, for this Arab American, I've never noticed any kind of bias or discrimination inflicted on me. But I was born and raised in Michigan, and I have no accent. I don't have a Michigan accent. But that doesn't get me stopped at airport security checks or any place else. I don't get strange looks in a crowded terminal, whereas I have relatives in Lebanon whose coloration is different, and they certainly would be stopped and get strange looks. Arabs in America, Americans of Arab origin, if they can be identified, long before 9/11, found their car tires slashed frequently, marked up, painted graffiti on the windows, insults and stuff. It was not uncommon. In the early 90s, the LA County Commission on Human Relations established an adjunct organization called the Media Image Coalition, representing about 25 different ethnicities. I represented Arab Americans. There was a Muslim representative or two. You know that Arabs are not all Muslim. There's a large minority of Christian Arabs. And every other ethnicity and race was represented. Black, yellow, brown, red. And what we did was approach the studios, major studios and the networks, and explain to them the harm some of the things they presented, either in the straight news or in motion pictures, was hurting people, hurting children, and implanting bad images in non-ethnic Americans that would linger with them and result later in fallout because of those attitudes they had. And we had a positive effect. Nothing's perfect, but we did have a big effect. And some of the producers met with us and went back to their offices and drawing boards with the resolve to fix some of the harm that they had done. And you have a picture like Three Kings. Remember that with the adorable George Clooney and a few other good actors. And there are others too, not many. But the bulk of motion pictures from Hollywood, not the Arabs, ridicule them, make fun of them, and vilify them. Those films are still out there, and they're still running on HBO and late night television. How do you fix it? You counter it with more honest and decent portrayals, but that takes a long time. Let me add another ingredient that is related to this article. Israel and Palestine have been at war for quite some time. Clearly, Israel wants all of what was Palestine. Oh, by the way, there are some papers that were passed out to all of you, and I welcome you to use any of the questions on here. It's old stuff to me, and I'll be happy to address any of that stuff. If you follow the news from Israel and the rest of the Middle East, you're aware then of the multi-million-dollar campaign that Israel launched to improve its image in America. Well, they don't need to spend money to improve their image. They need to stop doing the things that have besmirched the image. And that's well known and advocated by many Jewish Israelis. But the Israelis in charge of the government, Mr. Netanyahu, and his foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, have other ideas about what Israel's fate should be. And just in the past few days, Avigdor Lieberman introduced a bill in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, to annex the West Bank. So Israel's strategies over the years make it very plain that their goal is to have all that land that is now potentially an Arab state, a Palestinian state. Everything they've done diplomatically and strategically leads to no other conclusion. They want that land. The war could have been settled long ago if they had ended the occupation and established a normal relationship with Palestine. Twice, all 22 Arab states offered Israel what Israel had been asking for years before that. In 2002 was the first offer by the Arab League, representing all 22 Arab countries. They would grant Israel what Israel has been asking, which is normal relations, normalized diplomatic relations, which would include trade and tourism, etc. Israel ignored the first offer in 2002. It was made again about 5 years later, and Israel again turned it down. Why? I can't imagine any reason other than that if they did that, they would lose the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They still occupy the Gaza Strip, by the way, even though they removed the settlements and the garrisons. They still occupy it because they totally control it. It's surrounded. The airspace is Israel's airspace, and the coastline is guarded by the Israeli Navy. Not just guarded, but sealed off. Fishermen, the Palestinian fishermen in Gaza, cannot make a living because the Israeli Navy doesn't let them go out any further than 3 miles off the coast, when 20 miles is the amount of sea off someone's coast as considered part of that state. Of course, Palestine is not a state yet. It's coming up to apply for one in September. But you must have noticed in the news today how stupid some of the Palestinians were, who attacking the Israeli city of Eilat, which is down at the tip, southern tip. They killed 7 Israelis, and 7 of the fighters were killed. And what will be the attitude if you were members of the representatives sitting in the General Assembly? How will that affect your attitudes toward Palestine when it seeks to be recognized? There's never been a unified, smart, diplomatic motion in the Palestinian plan at all. Now, until very recently, 22 Arab states were authoritarian. Monarchs and dictators, all dictatorships, all despots, some more benign despots than others, but all despots. Despotism, however benign an attitude it may claim to have or behave in a way they think is benign, is not benign. The only benign structure is where the ultimate power is with the people. And what's happening in 2011 is sensational. Can you imagine so many different countries under dictatorships getting out on the street and saying, we don't want you ruling us anymore? And many more are going to die before it's all resolved. Egypt was quick with deposing Mubarak, but the ruling military council is not being too quick to install democratic institutions. But the pressure, international pressure on them will be. Tunisia was like that. A number of Tunisians died in a short period of time, but then as soon as the people arose, out went the dictator. He's sitting in France someplace now, in the Riviera or someplace. The other states are moving. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya is going to see his last days. He's seeing his last days now, actually. And Bashar Assad of Syria is headed for a fall. Only today, I don't know why Obama waited so long to say Assad should step down, has no legitimacy to rule. And I may borrow one of your pipes, Alan, mine are kind of wearing out, even with the microphone. No, I'm not yet, I'm okay for a minute. I think I've established enough of a context to carry us for a healthy Q&A session. So I welcome your questions or comments.
What's too bad? This is obviously a topic. Please. This is obviously a topic that sometimes is discussed with less than full civility. I'm sure there's a wealth of questions that everyone in the room might have for Mr. Bustany. Please raise your hand and we'll get started. Todd, you're right in front. Yell.
Yes, Mr. Bustany, what would you suggest that the role of the United States might be to try to mitigate the issue and to try to support, if not that the United States is probably ever going to do it, but if you were to see the United States doing the best thing the United States can do, what do you think we can do to support the Palestinians and try to help them, if you were like president, you could make that policy?
Did everyone hear Todd's question in the back?
No.
Okay. I'll recap it. Todd asked, in Mr. Bustany's opinion, what could the United States do to effectively mitigate the effects of, what was the rest of the time?
What would the United States be able to do to help the Palestinians try to help them try to deal with Israel? I was asking Mr. Bustany what he would do if he were president in the United States to try to shift U.S. policy to try to help that situation out over there, to help overcome the terrible treatment that Israel has been visiting on the Palestinians.
That probably is a subject for a book. That's a really great question.
I love that question because it gives me an opportunity to give an answer which includes what I think is one of the most important things of concern to 310 million Americans. First off, let me just say that the United States ideally should act like the referee in a prize fight or the officials in a basketball game, where they operate fairly and adjudicate any issues that come up between the opposing teams. The United States has shamed itself by behaving the way it does. In the UN, for example, the number of resolutions passed in both the General Assembly and the Security Council that are unflattering to Israel number in over 100, maybe much more. I don't have that number in my head. And the U.S. and Israel and Micronesia and the Mariana Islands always vote with Israel, which means those four against 188 other nations in the world. We are shaming ourselves by taking that position. We can certainly protect Israel's safety by not pulling such silly, ridiculous stunts. Okay, now let me get broader. Let me pull way back with the camera. 9/11, 19 Arabs boarded 4 airliners. They split up the duty. And they hijacked them and flew them into the Twin Towers. 2 of them. One hit the Pentagon, and another one because the passengers, gutsy, courageous passengers, said, we're not going to let this happen. And they fought, apparently reconstructed later from cell phone conversations that some of the passengers made while the plane was hijacked and such. And they took out the hijackers, and consequently the plane crashed and they all died. 15 of the 19 were Saudi Arabians. The other 4, I don't know exactly where they came from, but they were all Arabs. And they were all Muslims. So that left a bad mark on Islam. Who does not know any Muslims here? Raise your hand if you have never met and talked with Muslims. Wow. Really, I'm impressed. I also think that there are enough Democrats in this room to sway an election, any election. Some elections are that close. So here we have 19 guys who were willing to kill themselves to hurt the U.S. There have been others too. And there have been others who detest the U.S. but won't make a violent act against it because it's not in their constitutions. But if you go back many decades, you'll see what we have been doing, the United States as an entire society, with a government whose business is business to ensure stability in different countries with resources that our businesses can exploit to their profit and to our profit as a society. With the help of the U.S. Marines, who prop up a dictator who ensures that political stability in that country, so our manufacturers and miners and fruit growers can go in and do business in a stable place and hire people for a very low wage. That's exploiting peoples who are not as industrially advanced as we are. We've been doing that, and that's not my notion. I learned from many others who've been telling us for years.
Perhaps we have another question in the offering.
Okay, but I haven't finished answering this one. But our behavior has stimulated enmity toward us. In many quarters, we've given ammunition, and it has come. Those chickens have come back to roost. We lost nearly 3,000 people on 9/11. That's enough on that for the moment. Yes, sir.
I challenge you on one thing you said, which is
Just one?
Just one, which you talked about the growers and our miners. They're the ones who are losing the jobs because our corporate oligarchy is shipping the jobs overseas. They aren't being hurt as much as the people overseas by the policies, and they need to wake up to this. And I think you're wrong to blame them. They would much rather have the jobs here. I would much rather have the jobs here.
I think he was talking about the people in those countries.
I was. I didn't make my remark clear enough. I'm talking about American industry
Let's talk about the code.
that takes activity to foreign countries because they can exploit the lower wages expected, and because minerals are in those foreign countries that they want to mine. But I agree with what you said about keeping business here at home instead of succumbing to NAFTA and such. Yes, ma'am.
Bruce.
Oh.
I'm going to do a short one.
Okay,
Diana.
we'll see.
Diana, speak up.
Bruce, you're next.
No, let Diana go.
No, I mean after Diana.
You mentioned this, that you didn't propose a solution, and you mentioned the attack in Iran, and you said, what's wrong with these people? And anyone that supports a two-state solution wants to know the same thing. So the question is, how do you get unity so that it's really clear who has negotiating power, so that the Israeli government can't say there's nobody to negotiate with, if they don't have viability or whatever.
That's what I alluded to when I said the Palestinians are not organized
Yes.
and are not focused as a whole people. Part of the difficulty there is that Israel is a Western country. It's not a Middle Eastern country. In spite of whatever Jewish history there was from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. The Jews who implemented the Zionist movement were Europeans and had been for hundreds of years. And they had been persecuted by European Christians for hundreds of years, which is what impelled the Zionist movement. And the Zionist movement had a justification to seek a Jewish state, and they did it the wrong way. They did it by simply taking. They used force and they used shaded diplomacy. And the Western powers were guilty because of the Holocaust. When we had, in a sense, allowed the Holocaust to go on, and we rebuffed many Jews who tried to come to the States for refuge. So it's complicated and it's nasty.
Bruce.
I agree with a lot of what you said, especially dealing with diversity in this country, but I may be one of the few people in the room that's actually been to Israel, I've been to Turkey, and I actually stayed in East Jerusalem and found the Arabs there to be wonderful people. I talked to people on the street. I talked to Jewish people on the street. Everybody there blames the leadership of their own parties and their own governments for the lack of having any kind of agreement there. But my question, which is probably one that's I hear a lot, and I'm sure you have an answer for, but the question is, if the Palestinian Charter calls for the destruction of Israel, and the Palestinians or the Palestinian leaders are unwilling to compromise and take that out of their charter, how can you do business with people like that? This is not to say that I am in favor of Israel's actions against the Palestinians, because they have been heavy-handed without, I agree with you on that.
Gotcha. I haven't researched the state of the charter of the Palestinian Authority. I don't think such a provision to destroy Israel is in the Palestinian Authority's charter. It may be in PLO's, but Arafat told us it was defunct. And whether they removed it, I don't know. The Hamas's charter does include an intention to remove Israel from Palestine. And That's a non-starter for Israeli-Palestinian peace with Hamas. But Hamas is outnumbered by the Palestinians of the West Bank. There are 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza, 2.5 million in the West Bank, which some in Israel want to annex. So what will they do with 2.5 million new Israeli citizens who are Arabs? There are already 1.2 million Arab Palestinian citizens there. Yes?
Well, you fed right into it. I was wondering if you could say something about what life is like as an Israeli citizen that is a Palestinian. You know, what life in being in the minority, being a Palestinian Israeli citizen, what that life was like.
Gotcha. It's like being a second-class citizen in the U.S. before the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Theoretically, and in fact, there are Arab Palestinians. Palestinians are Arabs, and they like to be called Palestinians rather than just Arab. There are Palestinians who run for office and are elected and serve in the Israeli Knesset. I've interviewed a couple of them on the radio show. Life for them, according to them, is miserable. They're not free. They are not full citizens in the country in which they hold citizenship.
There was a question. Yes.
One thing I don't recall you mentioning when you talked about occupation, there was about 18 years when before the 67 war, when Israel just did not occupy any of these areas, and when it accepted the UN partition, didn't even have Jerusalem, old Jerusalem, and yet during that period, when Israel sought peace, the Arab countries would never even negotiate with Israel, and the leaders kept talking about driving Israel into the sea.
Very good point. It's something that's not understood by us with our mix of ethnicities and races and religions and cultures here, where we have learned pretty much to blend comfortably with one another. For the Arabs, who had been the main inhabitants of those lands for centuries, it was a cold bucket of water in the face when European Jews came in with the intention of creating a Jewish state. And it took 50 years, 51 years for that to happen, counting from what I consider the formal beginning in 1897, when in Switzerland, the first World Zionist Congress said, okay, let's create a Jewish state. And the majority said, let's go to Israel. A minority said, hey, we can't go to Israel. We can't go to Palestine. It's inhabited. And the majority said, yeah, but we're not going to be able to get Jews to go anyplace else. So we're going to have to go to Palestine and move the people there out. I lost my train of thought. What was the question? That happens more and more. What you recall it? I was going somewhere.
Let me see if I can recap your question. You were asking, in view of the first 18 years of Israel's existence, how can you reconcile the attitude of the neighbors of Israel at that time with what happened subsequently?
Everything is the fall of occupation, then what was the reason that there could be no peace and the Arabs wouldn't even negotiate during the 18 years when there was no occupation?
Yeah, I got it. I remember it now. Thank you, Alan. I mentioned that it's having a European society move in and claim a huge chunk of land to be a European state there, although they don't call it a European state. It clearly is. If you visited Israel, you can see that it is. Tel Aviv looks like North Hollywood. And the Jewish Israelis go through life without giving a thought, even though most of them have served in the Israeli military. They go through life without giving a thought to the fact that there's a war still going on. Their lives are as normal as ours, with maybe less traffic, but pretty much as normal, even though they know that their troops occupy somebody else's land. Now the troops, occupying troops, the people at the checkpoints, Israeli soldiers, are kids. Out of high school at 18, they're required to pull 3 years of active duty in the military. How cool, how wise can an 18, 19, 20-year-old be to handle adults whose land the Israelis have taken, and where that consciousness of them having lost their lands to the Israelis is with the Palestinians of every age constantly. The treatment by those young Israeli soldiers, men and women, of the Palestinians is abominable. When I went through, oh, America, please, right this way, sir. And I'm watching the way Palestinians are treated through the same checkpoint. I said before, it's complicated. And how that the answer to, I forgot the gentleman's name, Buck, is it?
Bruce.
Yeah. The solution is maybe going to be time, a lot of time, where Palestinians, huge number of them, are fluent in Hebrew, and a goodly number of Jewish Israelis are fluent in Arabic. And the more time goes on, the greater that lingual mutual mix continues. How much time do we have?
About another 5 minutes. Let's have 2 more questions for Don Bustany. Raise your hand now if you haven't had your question addressed yet, please.
And save me a minute after that.
Absolutely. Well, I have a question. Issues that are unpopular have often been sold very successfully to the American people. We now have liquor advertisements on television, which will increase the consumption probably of alcoholic beverages. Smoking.
It's come back?
No, now liquor is legal on TV now for the last several years. Never was for a long time.
Oh, it was for a while, and then it was...
I mean, hard liquor, whiskey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that gone now?
Yes. And smoking, of course, was sold to the American people for decades. My question is, the Saudis have indicated that they support justice for people of Palestinian origin. I see nothing in the way of an attempt to sell the issue of what is happening to Palestinians. And I'm intrigued by that because the most powerful thing is an idea. In your opinion, why have not there been concerted, focused, skillful advocacy efforts in the American arena of free ideas greater than what we have seen?
There's no free society in Arab societies. The #1 priority of every Arab ruler, be he king or dictator, call themselves presidents, #1 priority is to stay in power. And we're seeing that they slaughter their own citizens just to stay in power. Assad is such a fool. He could have done things very differently. The Tunisian president got it right away, and he got the hell out of Tunisia. Mubarak did not get it right away, but he did get it. But many Egyptians died along the way. So without a free society, that creative free thinking doesn't happen readily. And as far as the Saudis are concerned, the Saudi society is backward by our standards, quite backward by our standards. Okay, women cannot drive. That's just one manifestation of it. The other Arab societies, and don't attach this to Islam. It's not Islamic teaching to have the so-called honor killings when a family is shamed by the behavior of one of its daughters or sons. That came long before Islam, long before Muhammad walked the earth. Those were old, traditional customs, and they've hung on through the teaching of Islam. And they've got to go. They're just so out of place. They don't belong in the 20th or even the 18th century. But they do hang on in the backwoods, not in the larger population centers.
Well, I'm sure I don't know your name, please.
My name is Daniel Berdichevsky.
Please yell out loudly.
Sure. I have a question just going back in time a little bit. You were speaking of the Zionist conferences in the late 1890s about how they decided that the current state of Israel was the territory they wished to settle. If you could go back in time and speak to that Congress right then, what advice would you give them? Would you suggest that they go somewhere else or look for a different solution for entering that land?
I have an answer for that because it's something I've thought about over the years. I'd have said to them, look, if I were one of them, I'd have said, look, we are Europeans, Jews and Europeans. Our culture is very different from the people who inhabit Palestine. Even the Jewish Palestinians, the Palestinian Jews, are different from us. They call themselves Arab Jews. Their first language is Arabic. They eat the same foods, traditional Arabic foods. They shop in the same markets, malls. And I just said, there's only one way that we can peacefully and productively move into Palestine, and that is to make a proposal to the people whose land it is and who live there. And we offer them what we can bring to that land by way of our great technological development and business experience, which may clash with some of the Islamic ways of doing business, but maybe not. But I just said, go in and ask. Don't go in and push them out of there and just take over, which is what they did, unfortunately.
Well, everyone, this is unquestionably one of the vexing issues of our time. And I, for one, am very pleased to have such a reasoned exposition of a point of view we don't often hear. I think we all would like to thank Don Bustany for joining us this evening.
Don't thank me yet. There's one point I want to leave you with.
You can be thanked more than once, but please go ahead.
One point I want to leave you with. This has nothing to do with Arabs and Jews. I like my hands. This has nothing to do with Arabs and Jews of the Middle East. It has to do with our country. It has to do with what I perceive as the flight of democracy. And I don't know whether you agree or disagree, or whether you will agree when I point out to you that the seats in the U.S. Congress, in the main, are bought by special interests who use their big money to get specific candidates elected. When a specific candidate is elected by somebody else's money, he's beholden to that donor. No way is he going to ignore that donor's wishes. Do you know where your congressman is this summer? You know that 81 members of the House are touring Israel this summer? And you know who's paying their expenses? All of their expenses? No, not tax people. No. The pro-Israel lobby. So who are those 81 people going to feel beholden to for that lovely week's vacation, touring Israel, guided tour of Israel, being told what is there? So, what we have here is an impasse situation. We need to outlaw private money in campaign expenditures, campaign donations. But that Republican Supreme Court, those 5 destructive justices, have created a situation that may require a constitutional amendment to correct. And it makes me sick to my stomach to realize that I won't live long enough to see democracy returned to this society. We don't have it now. That's all I've got to say.